Now that we're in September, I need to make another election prediction to update you on who's the most likely to win this upcoming election. So here we go. First, we have to talk about the recent polls. So, in general, Harris is leading in terms of the popular vote, but what matters is not the popular vote, rather, it's the Electoral College. Whoever wins the Electoral College wins the election. The popular vote doesn't necessarily matter, and in the past, Democrats have won the popular vote, and this time is no exception. Harris will likely win the popular vote against Donald Trump, but stay tuned to see if she will win the Electoral College, because that ultimately decides the presidency. Moreover, I should keep you updated on favorability ratings. So Harris's favorability has skyrocketed ever since she became the official nominee. Now she has a net unfavorability of around 1%. On the other hand, Donald Trump, the other major contender, has an unfavorability of almost 10%. So you think that Donald Trump would lose the election because he is way more unfavorable than he is favorable, and Harris is almost 50-50 in terms of unfavorability and favorability. However, the answer to who will win is not so simple. Sometimes the unfavorable candidate will actually win because they're able to get their base to support them and they're able to get more people to vote. Also, becoming the president isn't always a matter of favorability. While many people liked Jimmy Carter as a person, they did not think he was the greatest president. On the other hand, some presidents were not the greatest people, but were great presidents. So favorability should be taken with a grain of salt, and approval is the more important metric. So now if we look at approval ratings, Harris has a completely different story. Her net disapproval is almost 6%, and she's the vice president, which isn't really that important of a role, and a 6% disapproval for a vice president is rather high. But if we go back to the favorability for our vice presidential candidates, JD Vance's net unfavorability is about 11%, and Walz's is a net favorability of 5%. So it does seem like Walz is more favorable than Vance, but it's not really going to affect much other than the state of Minnesota, which is Walz's home state, whereas Vance will help Trump win the state of Ohio. Also, it's interesting to see that Harris didn't really get a convention bounce. So, convention bounce is basically when the national convention for a respective party happens, usually their candidate will start doing better in the polls. However, after the DNC, Harris didn't really get a convention bounce, which can show that Trump is gaining in steam. Because Trump got a convention bounce after the RNC, Harris did not get one after the DNC. Or maybe she is getting a convention bounce, but at the same time, she's becoming less popular with certain groups of people, so you can't really see it through the polls. And after the bounce is over, she will continue to lose support. It does seem like she's doing better among women, but Trump is doing better among white men. So this is important to note because Trump is also doing better among minorities, according to most metrics, especially since 2020. So with that in mind, Trump is the current favorite to win this election, but we do have to look at polls to substantiate this claim. But before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe in order to join the 12%. And now, back to the video. We're going to start with the safe states for both parties. Harris starts with Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, all on the West Coast. Then she gets Illinois in the Midwest, as well as Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. She also picks up Maine's 1st District and New York, bringing her to a grand total of 191 electoral votes, practically without lifting a finger. As for Trump, he picks up Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and its 1st and 3rd, Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, and West Virginia. Some of these states remaining will go to Donald Trump. In fact, a lot of them will, but not by the same margins as the rest of these. For it to be solid red, I think it should be around 15+%, which means Ohio is not solid red, Minnesota is not solid blue, Iowa's not solid red, but it'll go to Donald Trump. Texas is not solid red, but it'll go to Donald Trump. And there we have it. So this is our current ratings, as well as Oregon not going solid blue. So now Harris currently leads by 3 electoral votes over Donald Trump, but it is still anyone's game. Remember, Florida is still here, and many other states with many electoral votes. And so now that we have our battleground states, I'm going to start with the states that are less competitive and slowly but surely get to the states that are more competitive. For the less competitive states, we have Colorado and New Mexico. Both of these two states did go to Biden in 2020, as well as Democrats for as long as I can remember. Last time one of the two went to Republicans, in fact, both did, was in 2004 with Bush against Kerry. It looks like they're going to go to Harris with around a 10 to 14% margin, meaning that they will not be safe, but will still go to Harris. Now that she's up to 206, she looks to continue her lead with a few more states. In fact, she picks up the state of Maine. The state of Maine will be slightly closer than the other states, being Minnesota, Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico, but it'll still go to Harris. If we look at these polls in the state of Maine in particular, Harris is up by around +8 according to this one poll. Keep in mind, RFK Jr. did endorse Donald Trump, and Maine is a state where third-party candidates typically do best. Trump will close this gap a little bit against Harris, but Harris will still lead against Trump in Maine. Next, we have New Hampshire. New Hampshire often votes the same as Maine, also doing it as far as I can see. The last time either state was close was 2016, but in 2020 they both were not close at all, with Biden winning both by over 5 percentage points. In 2024, there will likely be a similar story, and as we see in polls in New Hampshire, Harris is leading by an average of around 7, and most of these polls have her up by at least +5. So while New Hampshire will be slightly closer than Maine, Harris will still win, picking up its 4 electoral votes. So now she's up by a grand total of 24, but Trump looks to bring back the lead, starting with Florida. Florida is one of the few states where Trump outperformed his 2016 self, doing it by over 2 percentage points. A lot of this is due to Trump doing better among the Hispanic vote, as many Cubans in Florida support Donald Trump, and he's just performing better and better with that population. Additionally, many older people move to Florida, and Trump does well with that population as well. So, with that in mind, Trump will win the state of Florida maybe by about 5 to 7 percentage points, bringing him in the lead by 6 electoral votes. So, you can see all those states Harris picked up really paled in comparison to the one state of Florida, because Florida ranks third in terms of electoral votes. As we continue, we now go to Nebraska's 2nd district. While it is in Nebraska and you'd assume it would go to Donald Trump, the betting markets say it has a solid chance of going to Harris. For one, Tim Walz is from Nebraska, even though he is governor of Minnesota. Kind of confusing, I know. But regardless, Nebraska's 2nd is more urban. As you can see, it is the smaller district of Nebraska, and all of these districts have the same population. So this is more densely populated as it's more urban. Harris does well among urban communities, leading to her winning Nebraska's 2nd over Donald Trump. So now she is losing by only 5 electoral votes. However, Trump cancels out Nebraska's 2nd, picking up Maine's 2nd for himself, bringing him to 219 electoral votes. According to the betting markets, Trump has a pretty solid chance, being 82% at winning Maine's 2nd district. And contrary to Nebraska's 2nd, Maine's 2nd is the more rural part of Maine. As you can see, it has an even split with Maine's 1st in terms of population, but it is much bigger in terms of land mass, meaning it is more rural, and Trump outperforms Harris in terms of rural communities. So, with the election practically in a dead heat, we now go to Virginia, where Harris picks up its 13 electoral votes, bringing her 7 above Donald Trump. According to polls in Virginia, Harris is in the lead despite older polls having Trump in the lead. Harris has been leading by around +3 in every recent poll. This is around the margin of error, but it does seem like Harris will win in Virginia, as historically Democrats have won in Virginia, and the betting markets do say that Harris will likely win in Virginia. This brings her 7 above Donald Trump, but remember, with 93 electoral votes up for grabs, this election is still anyone's game. The next state we head over to is North Carolina, where I view that Donald Trump will win. It offers 16 electoral votes and went to Trump in 2020. Being one of the few swing states to do so, it went to Trump in 2016, and it's gone to Republicans for the past few elections. Additionally, according to the recent polls in North Carolina, Donald Trump is in the lead. It is very narrow, but it does seem like Trump is winning despite Harris's convention boost. The betting markets tell a similar story where Trump has a 62% chance, gaining a 2% chance in the last week of winning North Carolina. So this brings Trump 9 electoral votes above Harris, but don't get me wrong, it is still anyone's game. Our next state is Michigan, where Harris actually takes back the lead. It has 15 electoral votes, having many electoral votes for a swing state, and it will likely go to Harris. Michigan has a focus on the conflict in Gaza, where Harris is more conciliatory towards Palestine than Trump is, at least according to both of their campaigns. And it does seem like Harris is leading in Michigan, and this may be one of the reasons, among a few other reasons. One being Michigan having many urban areas, with one being Detroit, and it votes heavily for Harris. Another being that historically Democrats have won in Michigan, even though Trump barely picked it up in 2016. And the third is that betting markets have Harris leading in Michigan with a 61% chance of winning. So it does seem like Michigan will go to Harris, bringing her above Donald Trump. Still, Trump has a state up his sleeve, and that state is Georgia. Georgia is in the South, which historically goes Republican. We can see that it's gone Republican for many past elections, last going to the Democrats in 2020. But other than that, it last went to the Democrats when Clinton beat Bush. And we can see that in both of these two elections, the Democrats barely won Georgia. Despite having promising Senate elections for the Democrats, it does seem like Georgia will go back to Donald Trump. In fact, according to betting markets, Georgia has a 58% chance of going to Trump. And one major factor that will lead to Trump winning in many of these states that he lost in 2020 is the fact that Biden is an unpopular incumbent, as exemplified by a few metrics. One, he dropped out of the election. And if he thought he would win, if he thought he was popular enough that there was no way he'd lose, he would have run. If he thought there was even a 40% chance he'd win, he would have run. Additionally, his approval is extremely low, showing he is unpopular. His disapproval is at 54%, which is pretty high. As we remember, Trump's net disapproval was 11% after January 6th. So it does seem like even at Trump's most disapproved moment, he was still not as disapproved as Biden is now. And Trump lost the election because he was disapproved at the time of the election. COVID was in full swing, etc., which led to Trump losing. But due to Biden's disapproval, Harris being a part of that administration, and many other factors, it does seem like Trump will pick up steam even in states that he lost in 2020. So now Trump is ahead by 10 electoral votes over Harris. And the next state is Arizona. So Arizona offers 11 electoral votes, and it can bring Trump inches away from the presidency. Arizona will actually go to Donald Trump, and it'll be our first state that goes in the tilt column. As we can see by these polls, Arizona is barely going to Donald Trump, being even in some of these polls. Given the convention boost, etc., and also Trump is leading by less than a percentage point, it does seem like Trump will win in Arizona. The betting markets agree, with Trump gaining 3% in the past week in Arizona. Arizona has also historically gone to Republicans, only going Democrat in 2020, just like Georgia. So for the aforementioned reasons, Arizona will go to Donald Trump, bringing him 8 votes away from the presidency. Nevada will also go to Donald Trump with its 6 electoral votes. As we can see by these recent polls in Nevada, Trump is actually in the lead, even though some polls conducted a few weeks ago did have Harris in the lead. We got to remember the convention boost. These were right after the convention, leading to Harris having a little bit of a bump. The betting markets say that Trump is leading in Nevada, but it's essentially a coin flip. Even though the polls have been less promising for him, he will win in Nevada, bring himself to 268 electoral votes. Contrary to my last prediction, I now have Trump winning in Wisconsin. There are some polls that are outliers in Wisconsin, but in general, it does seem like Trump will take the victory in Wisconsin. In the recent polls, as we factor in the convention boost, Trump is in the lead. These polls by Bloomberg seem to be outliers, as Harris leading by around 9 percentage points in Wisconsin, likely one of the closest swing states in this election, does not seem possible. Moreover, Biden barely won Wisconsin in 2020, and it does seem like Trump will pick up that 1% that he needs to win in 2024, especially considering that RFK Jr. backed him. So he gets up to 278 electoral votes. But if he doesn't win Wisconsin, if Harris wins Wisconsin, the election rests on Pennsylvania. So let's cover Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania has an interesting trend. In Pennsylvania, about 3% of voters are still undecided. And this can be extremely important. And here's why. Most of these voters are moderates or independents, meaning they are genuinely still deciding who they're gonna vote for. And in past elections in Pennsylvania, it was extremely close. Biden barely won in 2020, Trump barely won in 2016, so on and so forth. So Pennsylvania will likely be the deciding factor in this election, and it can be extremely close, and we may not know what will happen until literally election day. Moreover, it's expected to be decided by less than a percentage point according to 538, and according to some betting markets, Trump is expected to barely win in Pennsylvania. So with that in mind, Pennsylvania will be extremely close, and we need to pay special attention to that state on election day. But without further ado, let's cover Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes, and I think it will be the closest state in this election. Trump is leading according to most recent polls, but some of the past polls did have Harris in the lead. But the polls before that had Trump in the lead. So we have to break the tie with the betting markets, who say that Donald Trump is currently in the lead in Pennsylvania. So as we can see, Trump wins Pennsylvania, winning this election 297 to 241 over Kamala Harris. So if you like this prediction, you want more, make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.